right, it's your brother Zion Lex. Sign up for our online academy, which is Learn Torah Hebrew Academy at patreon.com/Learn Torah. There are several classes that we offer. We offer a Biblical Hebrew 101 class for beginners. We have a Biblical Hebrew 102 class for people who are a little bit more advanced. We also have a weekly Torah class. We also have our Patriarchs of the Covenant course, our Matriarchs of the Covenant course, and a bi-weekly rabbinical course. All of these courses can be found on Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Learn Torah. You guys are definitely in for it. It's a very invasive class. All of our classes are deeply invasive and very, very meticulous to the T when it comes to understanding the culture, the heritage, and the history of our ancient ancestors. So sign up for Biblical Hebrew at patreon.com/Learn Torah. I am your brother, Zion Lex.
I want everybody to go out there and I want you all to get Nusak Afriki Peshat, Hebrew/English, Sidor Sambation, the legacy of the B'nai Moshe, by the chief rabbi of Africa, Rabbi Pinchas Eliyahu Shaddai. This Sidor, I'm not sure if you guys could tell, it is thick. It is thick. And it contains all of the prayers in Hebrew and in English. Although there are some left in Hebrew, in the very beginning, there are prayers in both English and Hebrew. This Siddur will help everyone in their day-to-day life to approach prayer. All right, shalom, everybody. On this beautiful Shabbat Eve, once again coming to you, we got another banger. I got the honor again of being joined by my guest, Princess Hawa Hadassah. Shalom, shalom. How you doing?
Shalom, Nasi, Rob, Avdiel. I'm doing great. Ready for the Shabbat.
I like the sound of that. Rob. No. I'm doing great. This is a very important topic, a topic that is seldomly discussed in biblical religious circles, and I want to say virtually never discussed in the Israelite circles, right? Virtually never discussed. Especially from a more scholastic look. When you look at how God is represented in the different religions, spiritual systems all throughout the world, there is clearly a lot of nuances and varieties to how people conceive and perceive the concept of God. Some people see the creator as androgynous, male and female. Some people see the creator as female. Some people see the creator as male exclusively. But the point is, as you travel around this globe, this world, sorry, flat earthers, as you travel around this globe, you'll notice that everyone has their own idea for what the creator is. So today's lecture is entitled The Divine Feminine in the Torah and Kabbalah. And just to open up, I want to ask you, what inspired you to present this particular lecture for us today? Do you think that there's a void in our community for understanding that there is actually a divine counterpart to the masculine divinity of the creator? Is this lecture intended at filling that void, that missing gap in the community, or what have you? What's your intentions on bringing us this lecture this afternoon?
I think what initially inspired this presentation was seeing the kind of broader conscious community, the polyistic community, even the Kemetic community, African spirituality, adherents and practitioners, seeing how there was so much vitriol kind of directed at our culture and our faith and our God in particular, because of the view that our God is exclusively all masculine, even aggressively patriarchal in an abusive sense. I've even heard some polytheists in the conscious community and the African traditional spirituality community refer to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as an abusive sky daddy. And so these types of views, these perceptions that others hold of our God must obviously be rectified. They're in great need of being rectified. And there's a dysfunctional imbalance in society as a whole due to kind of the woundedness of masculinity itself being demonized. Now we have these paradigms of toxic masculinity. We have these feminist ideologies that have insidiously taken over to where all the aspects of masculinity that were once protective are now seen as predatory. Aspects of the man as the provider is now seen as controlling. So masculinity in general has been warped, I think, because of a collective woundedness with regards to the relationship with the father as an archetypal concept, a spiritual concept, and the relationships between children and fathers in general, as all across the board, people from all backgrounds, we see the deliberate destruction of the family unit, the deliberate effeminization of masculinity in general. And more in particular, in the so-called Black community, we know that there has been a systematic attack on Black masculinity and the glorification of the Black woman, but really at the whole community's expense. So these ideas and tropes of the Black woman as God, the Black woman as the backbone of society, as empowering as they may have seemed, they actually have been to our collective detriment. And I think this can be healed by seeing that our God has both masculine and feminine aspects and attributes, and embracing that and allowing ourselves to understand that on many levels can bring healing to the community at large, not only just to our community, but I think society in general. So
Okay. Um, in trying to, let me use a developed term, in trying to psychoanalyze the mind of the average human in thinking of the creator, again, everyone has their view. We live in the so-called West, where the dominant view is to see the creator as a sky daddy, right? As someone who sits in the sky. European ideology has him as a white man with a beard, and he's sitting in the sky, and that's it. He's over us, and there's no feminine at all. There's no divine feminine. There's just the divine masculine, God, the Father. But in African spirituality, you do see those paralleling ideas of there being a divine feminine counterpart to the masculine divinity. Now, I want to ask you, is there anything that you're reading in the Torah, in the Bible, that's helping to develop your idea of looking at the creator, not just from a masculine perspective, but as well as a feminine perspective?
well, I think many of the divine names for our creator indicate this duality of masculine and feminine embodied within. I believe that there are many scriptural references to divine femininity, which, we'll go into in the PowerPoint in the presentation to come. So I think it's more than evident that the creator embodies both masculine and feminine, and indeed transcends masculine and feminine. The creator is bigger. I think we limit the creator by even attempting to define the creator as masculine or feminine, or even both. I think there's a transcendence that goes far beyond that, as creation has been differentiated into masculine and feminine as a reflection of the creator. which I'll explain more later.
All right, that's nice. That's nice. Fueled by the King James Bible and the myriad of English translations, there's this overwhelmingly dominant perception of masculine divinity, because we say of the creator all throughout the Bible, he and him, and he is God the Father, right? So because a matriarchal archetype of the divinity is not highly pronounced in the text, so to speak, it leaves most people to conceive of the creator as exclusively masculine. Now, I just want to add, before you go into your presentation, that the creator is neither a man nor a woman. However, there are many ways in which the power and expression of the creator is revealed in this world. We say every single day, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Why do we need to pronounce and speak the Shema daily? Why does that have to be almost a trance for us? Because obviously the creator has many different ways that he manifests his power, his might, his love, his kindness in scripture. And due to the fact that he may appear in one place as a judgmental God, and in another place as a loving, kind God, in another place as an empathetic God, people have conceived that these are different entities, different deities. So the creator reminds Israel, and by extension all of humanity, that even within the fact that there are myriad ways that his divinity is expressed, all of those expressions are ultimately stemming from one source, which is completely unknowable as it relates to the essence of that source. But what that source does reveal to us comes with many different expressions. But again, ultimately, it's all one. So on that note, just before you go into your presentation, I want to ask you just one more question. What is wrong, in your opinion, with the conscious community's desire to want to maybe even overemphasize that the Bible has no female deities that it reveres? The Bible has no female angels. And so the Bible, for many other reasons, cannot be taken seriously, because in the world that we live in, it's not just men, it's women. It's not just masculine, it's feminine. In African tradition, it's not just male deities, it's female deities. It's not just male angelic presences, it's female angelic presences. So what are your thoughts on the conscious community's need to continually attack the Bible and its teaching and its way of looking at the creator? What do you think is the motive behind that, and what are your thoughts about that in general?
Well, this presentation, I believe, I'm imploring the viewers to also go back, if they feel led, to look at the previous discussion that we did concerning who is God's wife. And this presentation is more so a continuation of the previous one. And a lot of that was brought to the surface, which I'd like to flesh out more during this presentation. But the idea that the conscious community is so fixated on proving whether or not our traditions attest to feminine deities or feminine aspects of the creator, I think it comes from this obsession with seeing self. And it's nothing necessarily inherently wrong with that, but I think it comes from a certain degree of spiritual immaturity. I believe that the idea that most of humanity began with the worship of women as gods and divinity, I think there's good reason for that. I think primitive and primal humanity was able to see the marvels of childbirth even as divine. And when you're able to view childbirth as this awe-inspiring creation of something out of what seems to be nothing. Of course, the first humans would see that as the height of divinity and revere and even fear women as these very mysterious and very powerful creatrixes. So that's not without good reason to desire to revere woman as divinity, and the need to see divinity defined by this union that we do find in all of the universe. All of the universe is created with these dualities and polarities of masculine and feminine. The need to see that embodied and personified and even anthropomorphized is, I think, natural to the human mind. But a higher mind would understand that the creator transcends and defies all of that and is so much larger and more all-encompassing than creation. And to go back to how you expounded upon the Shema, our creator being echad, being united, being one, indicates that all of the emanations and aspects, all of the infinite manifestations of divinity is contained in one creator. So there's no real need to segment and compartmentalize into all of these differentiated deities. And thus that debunks, in a sense, the need for polytheism in a way, because most polytheistic traditions in and of themselves are really worshiping creation over the creator. And I think it's important to emphasize that we must return to the reverence for the creator, understanding that the creator does not need to be segmented and divided and differentiated into these multiple limited forms when the creator encompasses all of that. So why worship a series of so-called divinities when one creator embodies them all?
Very important point. Very important point. All right, so we're going to definitely go right into your PowerPoint. I do want to say to everyone that's watching, please make sure that you like the video, share the video, and comment and interact as much as you can. We may even, if we have time, we may even do a Q&A. Would you be up to a Q&A if people wanted to come in and ask questions live?
If we have time.
If we have time. If we have time. So, all right, I'm going to go right into the share screen, and we're not going to waste another moment. Also want to remind everybody that we do have a biblical Hebrew class occurring at 7:30 p.m. tonight. Biblical Hebrew 102. That is an advanced Hebrew class. That's going to be tonight at 7:30 p.m. The info for that will be on the screen in a couple of moments. All right, and here we are.
All right, so I titled this Mother of Gods, the Divine Feminine in Torah and the Kabbalah. You can go to the next slide. So as I prefaced the previous live that we did, we touched on this obsession in the conscious community with proving whether God has a wife, whether God needs to have a wife, and more in particular, whether our specific God of our culture has a wife. And there's this obsession with proving that Asherah or Asherah was worshipped as the wife of El, or one of the various names of our creator, and that was debunked by historical and anthropological evidence and simple mathematics and chronology. So the times and eras in which this Asherah or Ashara goddess was worshipped alongside El was a time of corruption. And this was a time after the law was given. This was a time after Torah was the covenant under which our people were essentially married to the Creator. So it's redundant to even have the idea of a so-called wife for God when we as a collective, and even the human soul as a collective, defer to our Creator as the wife, as the divine feminine. And we are married in covenant to God, to the Creator. And in a broader sense, the idea of the Creator being anthropomorphized as a male is not indicating that the Creator is exclusively an embodiment of all masculinity, for indeed the Creator has masculine and feminine aspects. The overarching idea is to understand in a human sense that we are to relate to the Creator as the feminine counterpart relates to the masculine in nature. So the vulnerability, the softness, the deference of a woman to her husband, for example, as seen in human nature, is the way we are to regard our Creator and revere our Creator in the awesomeness of the Creator's strength and majesty that is incomprehensible in its vastness. Yet, in reality, it also encompasses feminine aspects such as nurturing and nourishing, and invites even the same awe that we do give the mother in the sense of the mysteries of birth and the mysteries of creation and wisdom, as I'll go into later, wisdom and understanding itself being a maternal or feminine aspect of divinity, just as in the human dynamic, mother is the first teacher, the first impartation of wisdom and understanding to the child. So we can go to the next slide. So as I said, there are many practitioners of polytheism and even academic scholars who very aggressively try to prove again that Asherah or Astarte, Ishtar, Inanna, Lilith, and all of these queens of heaven were worshipped equally alongside this masculine creator. But as I said before, that was debunked by the timeline, that was debunked by history and the chronology of when our law was given. You can go to the next slide. So this time we will follow up on, is there a mother god in Torah? Is there a sense of a universal mother as the divine feminine manifestation in Torah and the Kabbalah? As we advance to the next slide. So as I've written here, throughout the ages, it has been well established that primitive peoples worshipped women as gods, and understandably so. For sure, there is no greater marvel man's eyes can behold than for a woman to seemingly create something from nothing and birth an entire human being, literally squatting and straddling the realms of life and death to bring forth a body endowed with a divine soul. Yes, of course, it seems woman as mother is the source of all, creator of life. To a primitive, even spiritually immature mind that believes in what is seen, woman rightly appears as God. You can go to the next slide. So we know that goddess worship in its many forms is seen as all-inclusive, all accepting, just as mother naturally is all accepting of all of her children, and even children that are not her own, as this powerful embodiment of empathy. The mother, as divine feminine nurturer, is the comforter who invites all to her bosom in powerful empathy. A mother will even suckle a child that isn't her own, whereas in the wild, male animals or fathers will eat or kill cubs that are not their own. The mother and the mother goddess as Isis in all her syncretized forms, worshipped in all polytheistic religions and goddess worshiping traditions, accepts all and belongs to all. She is generous, accommodating, and non authoritarian. Thus, this rebellion against the dominance and the enforcement of law, the disciplinarian sense of the patriarchal gods. And we see this manifested in society in this deviation into widespread hedonism and debauchery, which is a childlike manifestation, a childish manifestation of this rebelliousness against the order that masculinity and patriarchy naturally provides. So, as I'll hope to expound upon and make clear throughout this presentation, with Torah as the foundation of our tradition and the Kabbalistic mysteries of Chachma and Binah, wisdom and understanding, we don't need to worship an Ashtoreth, Astarte, Ishtar, Inanna, or Isis, or any of her other forms as a divine feminine wife of God or mother of God or universal cosmic mother, when we have Torah as feminine wisdom and understanding, as the womb mother, her teachings, which constantly nurture and nourish us as her sucklings, thus as the book of Mishli or the Solomonic book of Proverbs and Wisdom tells us, forsake not the words or teachings of your mother. You can advance to the next slide. So just a little flashback to our previous discussion on the wife of God and the worship of divine feminine. In many goddess traditions, there were what was called the Hierodul or the Kedashim or the Kodashim, the temple prostitutes. And as I've said in all of our previous discussions, what I love about this term and this concept is that the Kadeshim, the root of Kadesha, is linked to Kadosh and Kodesh, that which is holy, that which is sacred, that which is set apart. And indeed, these temple prostitutes were set apart for a designated purpose, to enact sexual rites and alchemy by the joining of masculine and feminine to bring forth fertility, to appease divinity, and to seemingly channel the goddess through their bodies, through their service. And as we explored earlier with even the account of Tamar and Judah in our Bible, in our Torah, the veiling of the temple prostitutes denotes the idea that the face of the woman is hidden because she is then set apart. She is no longer the worldly, earthly woman. She is now a vessel of the divine feminine. She is a channel in which the spirit of the goddess, whichever goddess is the patron of that temple in which she serves, for the male supplicant to then join with in sexual union. So this being set apart for a sacred purpose is this beautiful, I think is beautiful, this beautiful link between Kadeshim and the idea of Kodesh or Kadosh being set apart, which also has interesting parallels with the bride as well, the wife also being veiled and set apart for her husband, just as we as a collective as the Creator's people, are set apart and betrothed unto him via the ketubah, which is Torah, our divine marriage contract. And you can go to the next slide. So another link to the Kadeshim is the goddess Kadeshet, as she is known in Egypt, or Kadashu, the Holy One, a Canaanite goddess. And again, there are Kemetic forms such as Kadeshet. And this is a goddess of sexuality, revered for embodying the mysteries of sexual alchemy and fertility, as well as the divine concept of ecstasy as a form of inspiration and revelation, which I could say much more about that, even going into the Dionysian traditions and the Elegian mysteries and the all-female priesthood of Dionysus, the god of wine and madness and poetry and inspiration, who turned water into wine. And many use that also to say, oh, well, Yeshua turning water into wine was plagiarized from Dionysus. And that can easily be debunked as well at another time. But this worship of this Holy One, this sex goddess, we will see has its detrimental consequence. I would argue that traditions that have glorified goddesses of sexuality in an unbalanced extreme, without balancing the masculine and feminine, have quickly spiraled into what I call the slippery slope of feminism, or the slippery slope of goddess worship, in which society quickly devolves into massive depravity, as we will see advancing to the next slides. And that's more about this goddess. You can go to the next slide for the sake of time. So, some interesting visual representations of some of the interesting idols and iconographic forms of worship. In some cases, these phallic-looking configurations were worshipped in the sex magic or sex worship of some of these goddesses, most notably Asherah. And there's so much that could be said there, but for the sake of time, I'll just read what's here. I was inspired in a way by this debate I saw on YouTube between Edward Dodge and Jabari Osaze, the venerable Kemetic scholar and priest. And he says he did several talks on the goddess worship traditions in the Bible and Isis worship as the inspiration for Christianity. And there's much I could say in response to those talks, as riveting as they were. But I did quote him here, as Edward Dodge says, Isis worship at the time was the universal salvation religion, open to all, which is interesting to me, as poetically articulated as that was. It also indicates the dangerously extreme tolerance that an unbalanced emphasis on femininity as feminism and the domination of woman through goddess worship can bring to society, such as we see today in this natural trajectory from extreme feminism evolving through the years and through first wave to fourth wave and post fourth wave feminism, to now we have this extreme tolerance where we see all forms of deviance and non-binary traditions being emphasized. And as I've written, indeed, seductive is the sensationalism of the sensual pleasures of the flesh glorified in goddess worship that so easily leads down the slippery slope to what some may call satanic self-worship and Crowleyan do what thou wilt depravity enabled by the lack of fear of judgment, because the mother goddess, like the human mother, is seen to tell all her children that they are all good. So just as a mother in all of her nurturing accommodation would like us all to believe, we're all good, we're all special, we're all wonderful. We see this echoed even in the paradigms in modern society today, where everyone wants to be accepted, everyone wants to be tolerated, even those who are depraved. We see even in legislation, the destigmatization and decriminalization even of dangerous things such as pedophilia and other pathologies. So it is incumbent upon the shrewd to notice, as history repeats itself, every major world empire fell violently and dramatically after adopting increasingly hedonistic, all-inclusive, all-tolerant, non-binary, goddess-worshiping traditions and philosophies, leading to normalizing homosexuality and sexual deviance and depravity. We can go to the next slide. So what I am hoping to illustrate, even as a throwback to the previous discussion, is the fact that everything must be in balance. So when we glorify this idea of the divine feminine at the expense of the balance of realizing that the creator does indeed embody and encompass both, then we lead to a skewed sense even of ourselves through the lens of glorifying the perspective and perception even of a mother without respecting and revering the balance that fathers bring, that patriarchy brings, the necessity of patriarchy. And I think even in the conscious community, I was about to say something, but even in the conscious community, there's this ironic emphasis on the need to glorify and revere the Black woman as God or goddess, and these goddess traditions, and the need to emphasize the power of woman and femininity in and of itself, which is admirable. However, lacking the respect for the balance and the necessity of patriarchy, even in the gatekeeping role of a father, has led us to kind of a lot of the collective dysfunction that we're seeing now in society. We know that fathers are the gatekeepers, and I'm not sure if I've already put this in the slideshow at a later point, but we need a patriarchal system, and I think a lot of the conscious community wants us to believe that patriarchy, particularly monotheistic or Abrahamic patriarchy, is a detriment to society, is a plague to society as a whole, and that all of our problems come from this Abrahamic Judeo-Christian sense of authoritative patriarchy, and that the nobility of the traditions of the past was in this kind of freewheeling, free-loving, feminine revering, sexually liberated, kind of mythical and mythologized monolithic Africa. And so these ideas, this over-idealization of this type of vision of what is attributed to our ancestors should be debunked and brought into right perspective through the reorientation of understanding a creator that truly does encompass both, but transcends the carnality of emphasizing the sexuality of these polytheistic goddess worshiping traditions.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to the slide.
Yes. So, in the interest of time, we can skip ahead a little bit because I do want to get into some of the more Kabbalistic points. As I said, God doesn't need a wife in a carnal sense because the Creator's intention for creation is to unify with us, expressing righteousness as unity within us and in our unity within ourselves. The universe, as we imagine it, was created out of the Creator's desire for differentiation. This desire was to create for himself, and I use that as a misnomer, just as a commonality, but of course, the Creator transcends the idea of him or her rightly. The desire for the Creator to create for itself a reflection of itself as creation, a reflection of itself into and upon which to project light and to distill, constrict, coagulate, and congeal wisdom into understanding. And from there, I'll just pause to note that in Kabbalah, we understand that there's this concept of the 32 paths of wisdom differentiated as understanding or Binah. And this, first of all, what I'm interested in from my background in the Torah, and I also gave a lecture on alchemy and the Jewish or Hebrew origins of tarot as a system. But the 32 paths of wisdom in the Kabbalah are embodied in Torah as the 22 major arcana, which are the paths of what is called the fool's journey, which is every human's journey goes through these 22 archetypal stages, which are known as the arcana. And these 22 stages of the arcana in the tarot correspond with the 22 names of the Creator. And the 22 names paired with the 10 sephirot of the tree of life make up and comprise the 32 paths of wisdom of Kabbalah. And these 32 paths of wisdom, again, are differentiated into understanding. So there we have Chokhmah and Binah. And this is where I would like to demonstrate the feminine aspect of the Creator through wisdom and understanding, wisdom itself as feminine, understanding itself as feminine, and thus Torah itself as wisdom, as the foundation for creation, being this divine womb from which we are all born to go through this journey to obtain understanding. In all thy getting, get understanding. And that is the human journey. That is the fool's journey of the tarot, the 22 arcana, the 22 names of God, the 22 aspects and emanations of God that we indeed contain within ourselves in our potential and hope to reach and realize and embody through this journey in our life. And the journey is going out to come back within, just as man or human ventures out of the mother's womb to come back within later in life, back to that foundational understanding, back to the waters of life, back to that womb space of Torah's wisdom to understand himself, ourselves, as the Creator, as Echad, the unity of the Creator. So I hope to reveal that through the subsequent slides as you advance to the next one.
Okay.
So creation itself and Torah with which creation was established, for me, is the great love story, as I refer to it, of the desire for reflection that necessitates differentiation as plurality and duality as polarity, to define by being defined by that which one creates and creates with. And this is not only the Creator, but we mirror the creator as we ourselves create our lives. We create the world around us. We are co-creators as we emulate and embody and imitate the creator. Just as man, as a husband, is given purpose by and with the woman he finds as his wife, an ezer kanekto, an eshet chayil. And therefore, the great love story of Torah is that Torah itself, as our covenant, is the ketubah, is the marriage contract, to where we, as humanity, as his people, our souls are married to him and made one with him, just as in marriage and even in sexual union between masculine and feminine, in this divine alchemy to become one. So again, we dissolve ourselves into the oneness that is the creator, as husband and wife are joined as one, as all of the universe is comprised of this alchemy, and everything in creation is created from this alchemy of masculine and feminine. And here I have from the book of Hosea, in that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband, Ishi, and no longer call me my master, Baali. So I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and justice, in loving devotion and compassion. And I will betroth you in faithfulness, and you will know the Lord. So thus, again, we have no need to worship a goddess as the wife of our creator when we as a collective embody that wife and we relate to the creator as a wife relates to her husband in the dynamic, not in saying, again, to emphasize ad nauseum, and that I have to be redundant even because this has to be dispelled because of the power of the stronghold of the falsehoods that have been levied against our creator through lack of understanding. So he is not male or female. He is encompassing masculine and feminine energetics and emanations, but again, transcending all of that. However, it is in reverence for and deference to his power that we refer to him as a man, as we are the more vulnerable in our worship of him, as the woman is more vulnerable, but no less powerful. We can go to the next slide. So this slide, actually, some of these slides also come from other presentations that I hope to do in continuation with this. So this was going to go more into the Ark of the Covenant and the story of Solomon and Sheba, and that's a whole different thing. So I was going to save that for another day, but we understand the chuppah of marriage and its parallels to the Mishkan, or the temple itself, this sacred space of covering, and the alchemy of union of divine sacred marriage and covenant through, again, this alchemy of masculine and feminine joining together in covenant, in betrothal. As marriage in humanity is the reflection on earth of the marriage of the human soul to the creator. We can go to the next slide. So I'm really trying to fit so much because I know last time we ran out of time, but there's so much that can be said. So I hope that the viewers are able to understand that there's a wealth of knowledge that we unfortunately have to rush through and brush over. And while certain points are being emphasized, there's so much more to be drawn out. So in the interest of establishing the understanding of the creator as masculine and feminine, we can see even etymologically the links between one of the divine names for our creator, El Maleh Rachamim, as denoting his mercy, his loving kindness, And again, using his and he is a misnomer because etymologically, this is rooted in the understanding of the womb, the mother's womb, as a space of compassion, as a space of infinite love, our first home in which we were engrossed and immersed and encompassed with this divine unconditional love, this maternal nurturing love that is all sustaining, from which we originate. You can go to the next slide.
All right.
So the tabernacle, I believe, in many ways is symbolic to the woman and the womb, and Torah itself embodying over and over again the alchemy of the all of all, as I refer to it, the incomprehensible, unintelligible awe of creation itself. You can go to the next slide. So as I touched on in a previous lecture, from which this slide derives, we know that even the Rosh, the head of the Tefillin, is considered a womb symbolically, as it contains Torah. And I have my belief that even the tabernacle itself is the womb space of Torah, as the supplicant enters the holiest of holies, as a man would enter, figuratively, the divine, unknowable, undefinable mystery of woman through the womb. You can go to the next slide. What man is not awed when he enters the temple? Indeed, what man is not awed when he enters a woman? Each time he enters either, he must make sacrifice and cleanse himself, lest he die. And we know there's much that can be said even about the dangers of improperly entering into sexual union, because it is indeed a blood covenant, just as our covenant to our God is a blood covenant. So much more can be said about that as well. We can go to the next slide, though. We could talk about the cherubim, but I would like to reserve time for some other excerpts. Next slide. So the body as the temple. We know that if the body is the temple, then the womb is the holiest of holies, where one enters wisdom, which is feminine, through penetrating and traversing into the unknown to thus know it. We know in the Hebrew, the word yada is used to refer to the knowing, such as when Adam knew his wife Hawa and she conceived a son. And over again, even in the book of Bereshit or Genesis, we see that the patriarchs are referred to as going in unto their wives to know them. And thus that in itself enacts an act of conception. So this intimacy, to know, is to become. As the old adage goes, to know her is to love her. And thus when one knows Torah, one loves Torah and obeys Torah and finds it a delight. Because to love is to obey, as the scriptures implore us that if we love him, if we love our Creator, we will obey his commandments for our good. And this sexual alchemy, in a sense, is how we enter the temple through the door of wisdom. We enter the womb of Torah through the alchemy. Union itself is the alchemy. as well as the unification of elements congealed to create the baby who exits the womb, exiting the womb or birth canal. And it is taught in traditions that every child within the womb is taught Torah, yet forgets. And even in the Yoruba tradition of Ifa Orisha worship, it is likewise taught in parallel that we all choose our destiny in the heavenly realms, and we are in this co-creative agreement with the Creator to create this life, to choose this life, and carry out this destiny. And so we know all of the wisdom of the mysteries of heaven, and we know all of the events of our life that shall play out in the path of our journey to embody this wisdom in the earth. Yet when we emerge from the womb, we forget. And so life becomes this journey, again, back to the tarot and the 22 arcanum, the fool's journey of going out to return back within, emerging from the womb to return back within to understanding, to remember, to recollect and reorient ourselves in the destiny that we knew and accepted and chose and even co-created before we forgot that we remembered. So anyway, I had some other notes, but you can go to the next slide. Again, just reinforcing the image of the temple to understand that the temple, even the tabernacle itself, and the meticulous instructions given for its formation was to embody in physical form not just merely aesthetic beauty of the edifice, but the spiritual potency of an earthly manifestation of the heavenly realm, as well as the tabernacle and the temple mirroring the human body, as the human body itself is a universe in miniature, in a sense, as even all the elements of the universe are contained within the human body, the human being. So we are universes in and of ourselves, even in our humanity, and that's the grand divinity, even in the vulnerability, the seeming vulnerability of our physical human form, our physical incarnation. As you go to the next slide. And the next slide. So again, drawing from an earlier YouTube live that we did on alchemy, we know that alchemy is this process, even this Kabbalistic process of creation itself, and how the universe was created through this alchemical union of elements, this dance of polarity and plurality and duality as masculine and feminine. And so even in the womb, the steps of alchemy, as you see here on this staircase, there are specific steps in the process of alchemy that are enacted even in the womb, even in the birth of a child. The coagulation of cells and substance that were once intangible and without form, even the fluidity, even of seminal fluid coming together through coagulation, and even sublimation as the womb goes through this process of heating, as even in the process of ovulation through conception, the woman's body naturally increases in temperature as the heat makes way through this sublimation, the womb itself becoming this crucible, as in alchemy, in which the elements are heated to coagulate into this new being that is created. As you go to the next slide. speaking again about duality. And I am feeling some type of way because I am missing one of my notes pages.
Take your time. Take your time.
Right.
Take your time. In fact, while you recover some of those pages, we're going to take a quick commercial break, of which I just want to remind everybody that we do have a Biblical Hebrew 102 class that's occurring tonight at 7:30 p.m. on Patreon, and we'll be right back, everyone.
All right. It's your brother Zion Lex. Sign up for our online academy, which is Learn Torah Hebrew Academy at patreon.com/Learn Torah. There are several classes that we offer. We offer a Biblical Hebrew 101 class for beginners. We have a Biblical Hebrew 102 class for people who are a little bit more advanced. We also have a weekly Torah class. We also have our Patriarchs of the Covenant course, our Matriarchs of the Covenant course, and a bi-weekly rabbinical course. All of these courses can be found on Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Learn Torah. You guys were definitely in for it. It's a very invasive class. All of our classes are deeply invasive and very, very meticulous to the T when it comes to understanding the culture, the heritage, and the history of our ancient ancestors. So sign up for Biblical Hebrew at patreon.com/Learn Torah. I am your brother, Zion Lex.
All right, and we are back just like that. So I just want to remind everybody once again, Biblical Hebrew 102 tonight at 7:30 p.m. Princess Hawa Hadassah, it's on you.
Okay, so as we speak of alchemy and duality, I'd like to re-emphasize that even in the Kabbalistic sense, there is masculine and feminine comprised even in the Sephirot, the divine emanations of the Creator. And all alchemy is marriage in a sense. You know, what is marriage except alchemy in which two become one? And marriage is the foundation of creation. And as I always remind people, there's a reason why, unlike other creation myths from other cultures, in our creation story, there were essentially two adults created. You know, creation did not come from children or infants being created out of nothing. We have a man and a woman created in the image of Elohim. And the plurality even of that indicates the polarity and duality of masculine and feminine. Thus, if man and woman were created in the image of a plural Elohim, then it would seem that the Creator encompasses both masculine and feminine to thus reflect itself as man and woman on earth. So all of life and everything under the light of existence is created by masculine and feminine union. Light itself, differentiated in this light, this divine luminescence also goes into the Kabbalistic concept of Or Ein Sof, you know, the light, the undefinable creator as light. So this light itself, differentiated through a prism to create color, is also a dance of plurality, as all colors in the spectrum are complementary and themselves combine to create secondary colors. You know, we all learned this from school. Just like a man and a woman as mother and father create a new thing. And we know even scripture alludes to the creator doing a new thing in the earth, creating a new thing. There's this constant creation of a new thing from alchemy. A child blended of the two becoming one, yet something altogether unique in and of itself. To draw from the work of African scholar Sobonfu Somé, who eloquently describes this process as the spirit of intimacy born of and from marital union, the third spirit born to and from the alchemical merging of who were once two strangers, and likewise the child itself as the third spirit, as the spirit of intimacy, born as a witness to the alchemical merging. And again, the womb of a woman may be seen as the crucible which is the tool of alchemy, in which a combination of fire, which is conceived of as masculine, and water, perceived of as feminine, combines and creates a divine being, or thus a child, another human, through coagulation of cells while heating to sublimation. You can go to the next slide. And you can go to the next slide. I think I read that. And so thus the masculinity and femininity of our Creator is evident even in one of the divine names or praise names of our Creator. El Shaddai refers to the Almighty God. It is also El Shaddai, the God of the mountain. But less well known is the etymological meaning of El Shaddai related to breasts, or being the breasted one. So we see that the nourishment that comes from mother, the nurturing of mother as the one who sustains life through the milk of her breasts, is also inherent and implicit in the very name of our Creator. So we have this beautiful juxtaposition of this very masculine image of strength as the God of the mountain, yet this soft, nurturing, welcoming as the bosom of mother. You can go to the next slide. Oh, you can go to the next slide.
My apologies. Whole time I'm speaking on mute like it's class.
Okay.
I wanted to stay here for a moment on the idea of El Shaddai because this is one of the divine names of the Creator that makes a great example and a unique case for considering that there is certainly a feminine parallel to the expression of the Creator, feminine counterpart. In the book of Job, especially, there are a number of divine names that are being used. But there's one very specific name that is often encountered, and that term is Eloha. Eloha. Now, we get the pronunciation Eloha from the Masoretic scribes, who place under the name, they put a patach. And normally, when we have the combination of kamatz he, it gives us the impression that the word is a feminine noun. And so, by proxy of the Hebraic scribes of the Torah and the Tanakh, we come to understand that Eloha is masculine because of how the scribes and Masoretes vocalize it, but grammatically, just looking at the word, it is clearly a feminine word. That is borne out most in the book of Job, where often the term Eloha is used to denote things that refer to women, such as giving birth in the womb, right? So for instance, in one passage in Job 38, matter of fact, I'm going to stop your share screen just for a moment, and I'm going to open up my share screen because I just want everybody to take a look at something as well. Just trying to add to such a powerful point that you're making. In the book of Job, everyone, chapter 38, 29, the Creator begins to engage Job about the limits of Job's understanding. Job is going through the most troublesome time he has ever had and experienced in his entire life. Yet he is still an altogether righteous man. So the last thing Job will want to do is curse God. Of course, we see that, unfortunately, his wife actually adjures him in several places to just curse God. I mean, look at all this stuff you're going through, and you're still serving God for what? He's not even delivering you. He don't even care for you. He's allowing all these atrocities to happen to you. Nothing seems to really break his faith, but he is so deeply challenged that he does begin to question the Almighty. And so After a series of statements and questions that Job has, the Creator himself engages in to question the Almighty. And so in verse 28 of Job 38, the Creator says to Job, does the rain have a father? Right? Hayesh la matar av. Does the rain have a father? He says, who begot the dewdrops? In the next verse, he says, from whose belly came forth the ice? Mi bitain, mi yatsa ha charach. And who gave birth to the frost of heaven? These two verses are extremely unique because they contrast a father and a mother, but all within the context of speaking of the Almighty who was responsible for all of these things. So this is extremely interesting, and I'm hoping that everyone is taking this in. In the book of Job, chapter 38, verses 28 through 29, the Creator uses an example of a father and an example of a mother to describe the creative expression of himself, of God. And notice that he contrasts it with both masculine and feminine, a father and a mother. In no other book in the Bible, more than the book of Job, you encounter the term Eloha, which again, several Hebrew grammarians do regard this word as a feminine. However, many of the Hebrew dictionaries challenge that, even though in several Bible translations, you will find the word actually used to denote the feminine, such as a goddess in some places. And so what I just want to point out for everyone on this particular topic is that when we're talking about the idea of the Creator as an omniscient, all-knowing deity, and omnipresent, he's everywhere, and omnipotent. Because of the omnipotent factor, a lot of people automatically think if he's all-powerful, if the source is all-powerful, that it must be a male, it must be a man. However, in the book of Job, chapter 5, verse 17, I would like to show you guys something. So, and that'll be my last point. This is your lecture, but I just wanted to chime in on your commentary for El Shaddai, which is where I'm about to land. So in the book of Job, chapter 5, verse 17, everyone will see the word that I'm speaking of right here, Eloha, right? That's the word, Eloha. Okay. It reads, hallelujah, Hine Ashrei Enosh, Yo Chichnu, Eloha, U Musar Shaddai, Al Timas. See now, happy is the man whom God reproves. Do not reject the discipline of the Almighty. In Kabbalistic thought, the way that the creative attribute and power expresses itself is through masculine and feminine. And so in Kabbalistic thought, and even in the pages of the Bible, as we're literally looking at right now, and I'm about to show you for yourself, judgment is considered stemming from or sourcing from the feminine aspect of the deity. So when the Creator judges and or is judgmental, the idea in the text borne out by the scribes, the sages of our tradition, is that this is the feminine side of the Almighty, so that in essence, the idea of the Creator's judgment is associated with the feminine quality of the divine. Now, we see that in the word Eloha, Eloha, which again, in the dictionaries, they'll tell you it's masculine. But if we take away, and I will take away, the vowels, then the form of this word is clearly a feminine word. Clearly a feminine word. Like you actually need the Masoretic scribes to make it masculine. It's a feminine word in form. Also, the term Elo is the singular form of the term Elohim, and I'll get there in a second. Then we have the word Shaddai, which is translated as Almighty. Shaddai in Hebrew also means breast, B-R-E-A-S-T-S, breast. When you look at the Shin, the Dalet, and the Yod, the Shin in biblical Hebrew suggests teeth. The Dalet in biblical Hebrew, that is literally Dal, Delet, that's a door or doorknob, or i.e. the breast. Yod is a hand. So the idea of Shaddai in Hebrew is that it literally means breast, but even examining the individual letters, Shin, teeth, which is in your mouth. The letter Dalet denoting the knob of a door, and Yod, it literally resembles the hand of a baby stretching out towards the breast of its mother to feed and suckle milk. So the term Shaddai in the Hebrew Bible is used to describe the Creator as he is the source of humanity's nourishment, just like the breast of a woman is the source of her baby's nourishment. Although, and I want to add, or I should say, however, there's also a usage of the term Shaddai, denoting the power of the Creator, that describes the Creator in the attribute of judgment and discipline, and which again is denoting the feminine quality of the Almighty. So I just want everybody to notice something. These two words denoting the Creator in Job chapter 5 and 17, they both are feminine in Hebraic form. Eloha and Shaddai. Shaddai literally means breast. Yes, it can mean Almighty, but it's also the Hebrew word for breast. Eloha is certainly the word for God, but in its grammatical form, it's the feminine form. Now, I want to point out something to everyone, and I'll land here. So we just saw the word Elo, and when people come to the word Elohim, everyone is of the opinion that the word Elohim is the plural form of the Hebrew word El or El. Well, if you know Hebrew, it's El. And that's incorrect. The plural form of El is Elim, and you find that several places in the Hebrew Bible. That's spelled Aleph, Yod, Mem. The plural form of El, the Hebrew word for God, is not Elohim. The plural form of El is Elim. And where you find it used in the Bible several times, it literally denotes lowercase gods, gods in the plural. So the term Elohim, if it's not the plural form of El, which is certainly a masculine Hebrew word, then what is it the plural form of? It's the plural form of the word Eloha. Eloha, the form that I just showed you. Hence, also you see the letter Hey, right? This word is spelled Aleph, Lamed, Hey. When it is voiced, or when you have the vowels, you'll see it like this. You see the kolam, the defective spelling of the Hebrew vowel, cholam. So there's supposed to be a cholam here. Just like in the book of Job, Eloha is spelled Aleph, Lamed, Wav, Hey. There's supposed to be a Wav here. The Masoretic scribes took that away. In place, they have what's called the defective spelling of the Hebrew vowel cholam, from whence we get the term Elo. There's supposed to be the letter Wav here. You'll actually see it in the Samaritan Bible. You'll actually see the letter Wav. So that the natural spelling of this word should be Aleph, Lamed, Wav, Hey, Yod, Mem, which at that point will be clear that the term Elohim is not a plural of the masculine term El, it's a plural of the feminine term Eloha. But I'm sure many people might be asking this question. And the question people are going to be asking is then, if the term Elohim derives from the feminine singular Eloha, then why does it end with the masculine plural? And I'll simply tell you, you'd have to actually know biblical Hebrew, because there are several Hebrew words which are masculine in form but take on a feminine plural. There are several Hebrew words which are feminine in form but take on a masculine plural. And I'll give you two examples. The Hebrew word for father is Av. Av. When we say Abba today, that's Aramaic, that's modern Hebrew. Biblical Hebrew, your father is your Av. The way to pluralize that is to say Avot. Avot. The ot is a feminine plural. The ot is a feminine plural. Let's look at the Hebrew word for women. A woman in Hebrew is Isha. Isha, that's woman. The plural form of that is Anashim. Notice that the plural ending for the word women in Hebrew takes a masculine plural form, im. I'll repeat that again. The word for woman in Hebrew is Isha in the singular. Its plural form is Nashim. So even the Hebrew plural form of women takes a masculine ending. So I'll say that to say this. Just because a Hebrew word has either a plural feminine ending or a plural masculine ending doesn't necessarily mean that that word is either masculine or plural. So you'd have to judge from the context of the sentence. You'd have to know a little bit about the tradition to determine how this word should be understood and how this word is currently being used. And I'll land there, my good sister, where you will continue where you left off. But I just had to share some of that because, again, in our community, a lot of people aren't doing what I call objective research, right? Everybody's parroting the teacher before them. And the problem, one of the main problems with that is a lot of the teachers before us didn't have the tools that we have at our disposal today, right? And I'm not referring to our teachers of old, like the people in the Bible. I'm talking about our current modern teachers that learned a lot of this 30 and 40 years ago, some of them 50 years ago. Many of them don't have the tools that we have available today. There are several discoveries that are made today that they don't have available. So we have so much more tools available today, so much more knowledge and information available today. So there must be an evolution in thought in what we're looking at today. And on that note, I'm going to go back to your share screen. My apologies, but I definitely wanted to add that.
No need to apologize at all. I appreciate you bringing that out. Those were very powerful points. And even as you spoke about the plurality of Elim, it, of course, brings to mind the song at the Sea of Reeds, Mi Chamocha by Elim Adonai. So who is like you among the gods? And this again goes full circle back to even the idea of Echad, the unity of our Creator, who comprises all like our Creator. Again, I find there's no need to worship a multiplicity of deities in a system of polytheism when indeed our Creator in all of his quote unquote emanations and attributes comprises everything that these segmented, compartmentalized multitudes of deities would represent anyway. So thank you again for presencing that. And indeed, I believe I have set my own eyes upon Eloha being used in Torah to refer to Ashereh herself as a feminine deity, thus denoting in the etymology, in the word itself, that this was designating a feminine deity that was being worshipped.
Absolutely.
Albeit in transgression of the covenant of Torah itself. And that was why our ancestors were, were subject to enslavement in and of itself. And it's, well, I'm not going to go. I was about to go somewhere controversial, but I'll leave that for now because I am, interested in bringing out some other points before time runs out. So as we go to the next slide. So here we see the high priestess from the Tarot Arcanum. This is the second card in the Tarot Arcana. The first card, interestingly enough, the Fool as the child, as we already illustrated, is represented by 0. But the first card, the card represented by the 1, is the Magician, which we also went over more of the symbolism of the magician, including, most intriguingly, the use of the circumcised phallus as the wand, when we know the phallic symbolism of the wand in and of itself, and the idea of masculine energy as linear and progressive, and the ability of masculine energy channeled in the linear sense through space and time to manifest as directed energy, whereas the womb in its circular cyclical nature denotes potential, undefined, unchanneled energy, which again we will see in Kabbalah defined as Binah, the understanding, the differentiation of that undifferentiated wisdom, which is the feminine wisdom of Torah as I see it. And thus the high priestess in the second card of the Tarot's major arcanum is here between the two pillars, which themselves represent masculine and feminine. Also Boaz and Joaquin, which is a whole nother story, a whole nother lecture that could be had about those mysteries. And what you'll see in her hand is the scroll of Torah itself. Thus the high priestess embodies the wisdom of Torah as she holds Torah. And particularly in this last artistic rendering that I particularly love is how she's holding the pomegranate, which itself represents wisdom. And some say the pomegranate was the tree, was the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil that was eaten in the garden. And there are also interesting links to the Greek goddess Persephone, the Empress of the underworld, and the initiation into kind of dark knowledge and sovereignty and rulership through a very sordid form of sexual alchemy, unfortunately enacted through the R word, as she was R-worded, as the story goes, by Hades, the king of the underworld. And that in itself is symbolic of this descent journey, which is common throughout goddess worship. Most notably the descent of Inanna, which herself is a later Sumerian form of Asherah or Astarte or Ashtoreth that is mentioned in the Bible. This queen of heaven, Inanna, has a famous story, the descent of Inanna into the underworld. And this denotes, in an archetypal sense, drawing from Jungian psychology, this idea of a descent and a stripping away of one's ego and a stripping away of what one thinks one is made of. These things that we hold on to and adorn ourselves with that we think make us worth something in this life. And through the stripping away of that, along with our ego, then we find true supremacy and sovereignty and true royalty, as in the story she is restored to her status as queen, just as Persephone is made empress in the underworld. But that was just a digression that I didn't even plan to go into. But I put this here just to represent the high priestess as herself embodying Torah, as well as the mother aspect, holding Torah, encompassing Torah, just as a mother holds the child. And even here, from the book Alchemy and Kabbalah in the Tarot, just a short quote. And he's talking here about the high priestess card. The mother carries her son, the word, within her arms, and she is seated between the two columns that symbolize man and woman. And so here we don't see a child physically in her arms, but this child, the son, is the scroll of Torah, which is interesting because we know the son, as some may perceive Yeshua, is the living Torah, the living embodiment of Torah. And Torah is wisdom. And the traditions say that Mashiach and Torah both existed before creation. But, a whole lot could be said, and a whole lesson in and of itself could be said about that as we advance to the next slide. So here, I'll try to condense this for time, but I wanted to touch briefly on the Hebrew calendar, and the significance of the feasts in relation to the gestation period of the child within the womb, and these very beautiful parallels that we see. So the number 40 is very important here. And I know you have a wealth of knowledge that you have brought out before on your platform concerning the number 40, and the gematria related to that significance. But we know that the period of gestation for a child is 40 weeks and 10 days, which is interesting because that is the cycle of the feasts. And first of all, the child in the period of gestation is in the womb as an embryo for 40 days plus 10 before it is even considered a living child. So the first 40 days are the days of formation and implantation. The extra 10 days accounts for the weeks from the first day of the cycle, which is the first day of menstruation, into the days of implantation. Interestingly enough, Yeshua ascends on the 40th day, which is actually the 10th day after the resurrection, when you include the 3 days of burial. And that in itself occurred, the crucifixion, a week after his arrival into Jerusalem. So there are some interesting parallels with Yeshua and the feasts prophetically, along with the gestation cycle of a child being formed in the womb. And there's much more I could go into detail about. But I do want to come, because I did briefly glance at the chat and I saw an interesting comment that I wanted to address, actually coming back to my notes about the debate between the revered and respected Egyptologists, Kemetic priest and scholar Jabari Osaze, and the author Edward Dodge, which I actually have his book over here, A History of the Goddess, which I've been going into with much amusement in preparation for this presentation. But in the lecture that he did, or the debate, or the discussion with Brother Jabari, Edward Dodge reminds the audience, drawing from his extensive knowledge of Hindu cosmology and Vedic theology, that the father is immaterial. And thus the masculine principle of the creator as father is comprised of thought and intellect, enlightenment, knowledge, ideas, the mind, meditation, and contemplation. And the mother in Hindu cosmology and Vedic theology is material, everything that is sensual and sensorial, everything that is of the flesh. And we know, even linguistically, the etymological links in Latin and in German, of which the English language is comprised of kind of this amalgamation of both. But we know that matter or mater in Latin and the German Mutter, both relate to mother as both matter, materiality, and matriculation. Hence, mothers being commonly perceived of as the first teachers. And by the way, in 2014, I did release a book, an anthology of poetry and short prose that was called Black Matter, Black Mother, referring to this very concept. So Edward Dodge goes on to say, she gives us the grain, the food, the wine, the pleasures of the flesh, the sex. It's all circular life, death, resurrection cycles. The waters from which God is derived from, that is Shakti. And while I love how poetically he articulated that, I would like to demystify that a bit and reveal how it really indicates the immaturity of the scattered and segmented mind that is insistent upon this polytheistic goddess worshiping ideal. So Torah and the mysteries of the Kabbalah reveal that our God, our creator, was not emergent from nor predated by the feminine waters as Shakti, or even as the void or triple darkness, triple blackness, personified as the primordial Tiamat, worshipped by the Sumerians, or even Olokun Kalunga, worshipped by the Yoruba in Ifa Orisha worship, or the Dahomeans in Dahomean voodoo, from which Haitian voodoo and New Orleans voodoo is derived. In fact, God divided the waters, and that act in and of itself is pregnant with erotic symbolism and alchemy, for those with eyes to see, from which he called earth to emerge as the masculine principle of stability, to temper the feminine intangibility of chaos. So we know that masculine serves to provide a stable balance and structure upon which I always say, even in relationships, man provides the stability and the security and the safety of boundaries and a firm foundation upon which women and femininity in its boundless and intangible, fluid creativity and creativeness can then thrive. But it has to be contained in a safe and stable, secure space, delineated by and built by that masculine energy. So that's why that balance is needed to temper the chaos that can come from femininity. And so it's not to glorify one above the other. It's not to glorify matter or even the carnality of the flesh or the sacral, sensual nature of embodiment, which is feminine, and even the idea of somatic healing, which is popular nowadays, is very feminine based, very much in the body, out of the mind. But we don't need to go again to the extreme of segmenting and separating mind from body. We understand that unity is necessary, again, as is necessary the alchemy of masculine and feminine. You can go to the next slide. Yes. The womb as the Holy Grail. And I'm going to just, glide over this for now, but trust and believe I will go much more in depth with this concept in particular when speaking about the mysteries of Mary Magdalene and Yeshua, and even to an extent, King Solomon and Queen of Sheba, and the idea of the womb as this Holy Grail, this chalice, this crucible, again, not only as wisdom itself, as Torah, but as the womb in which messiahs were born, And I do use that as a plural, indicating what I'll be going into as far as the mystery of the union between King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, as well as the dynamic between Mary Magdalene and Yeshua, which will be demystified from kind of the Gnostic and Tantric misconceptions surrounding their dynamic. But you can skip to the next slide. As we kind of get ready to bring this to a close, the next slide. Is there a next slide?
Oh, my apologies.
Right.
I was saying you broke up. I couldn't hear you. My apologies.
Oh, okay. Well, I hope it wasn't breaking up too much. Not sure what was missed.
No. Just that last part. Just that
okay.
last part you broke up when you said next slide. Everything else I heard.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. So here, and this is another concept I will gladly flesh out further in future presentations, but the idea of the anointing of kings and the role of women, and specifically mothers, in various traditions in the crowning and anointing of kings. And again, bringing that to King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, as well as Mary Magdalene's anointing of Yeshua for his burial. But here we see, I've used here this depiction of a Yoruba king and the crown, which traditionally features this bird imagery to represent Ajé Iyami, which is this amalgamation of primordial divine feminine energies, known as Iyami Oshoronga, my mother who devours, which is interesting in and of itself. But the mothers, also known as the witches, are this gathering of what some may call dark feminine forces, but these are the energies embodied as birds that anoint the kings traditionally. But the idea that they are first mothers, referred to primarily as mothers, is why I chose this imagery for this slide, because truly a man, I believe, is crowned upon exiting the mother's womb. The moment of a baby's head emerging from the vaginal canal, as the labia and perineal floor are stretched due to the pressure, is often referred to as the ring of fire by mothers and doula, midwives, and birth workers alike, as I myself am a doula and birth worker. And I've always loved this concept of the ring of fire. And so this ring encircles the baby's head as a crown. Thus, the woman, especially mother, is the first one to crown royalty upon emerging from the womb. So we are all inherently royalty, and we know that our God does call us a royal priesthood in the earth. But woman and mother is the first initiatrix, as women have always been a critical part in the ritual anointing of kings, sovereigns, and priests throughout history and mythology across all cultures. The man leaving the mother's womb embarks upon what Carl Jung calls the hero's journey. And again, the 22 major arcana of the tarot depict as the fool's journey, as the man seeks outside of himself for meaning in the external world, only to return back to the interior, the sanctuary of the womb, as he leaves to cleave and eventually joins in sacred marriage, or the Eros Gamos, as it is referred, with the woman now as his wife. Returning to the womb through the woman as wife, he finds himself as a child emerging from the womb of mother at his purest and most vulnerable again, given purpose and anointed through the rite of immersion, which could be likened to the mikveh of conversion in and of itself, in the waters of the grand mystery of the feminine mystique. And what I think is interesting, in return for the pain of the mother's ring of fire that was necessary to birth or deliver man into life itself, man gives back to the woman later, as an adult, the woman who is his wife, a ring of betrothal, just like the ketubah or the covenant of Torah was given to us in betrothal. This ring, given in return for the painful sacrificial rites of birthing, crowning, and anointing him, as his mother had, with his ring as a husband, he vows and binds himself to his wife to give her pleasure, provision, and protection in return. So it's this beautiful cyclical reciprocity in a way, returning back to divine femininity from the mother to the wife, and thus perpetuating this circle of life, as of course the wife then becomes a mother herself, but giving back this ring of marriage in exchange for the pain, the sacrifice of this ring of fire of birth that birthed the man into the world, to return to that wisdom from the womb. As you go to the next slide. I think I read that. You can go to the next slide. And the holy blood, holy grail. So I want to stop here and say, I would like to read a little bit from the wonderful Rabbi Ari Kaplan, who you have put us all up on game. You have introduced us all to the amazing Ari Kaplan, which is my newfound obsession. Yes. So to kind of bring everything home in full circle, the idea of divine femininity in the Kabbalah as emanations of the Creator are wisdom and understanding, or Chachma and Binah. So also I would draw parallels between Binah as understanding differentiated in its duality and polarity as Maya in the Hindu tradition, the Sanskrit word for illusion, which is conceived of in their theology as Divine Mother herself. So it's interesting that the Divine Mother, the supreme universal mother in the Hindu tradition as Shakti, is named after illusion, and thus explaining the difference between wisdom and illusion. I'll go ahead and read from the Sefer Yetzirah. Make sure I have my right page. So as we began speaking about the Kabbalistic 32 paths of wisdom, he writes the necessity by which we distinguish understanding from wisdom, which are often conflated. We often think of wisdom and understanding as kind of the same thing, but we know that, one denotes application and one is kind of an inherent given. The rabbi writes, if wisdom is a simple, undifferentiated mind, how can it be manifest as 32 distinct paths? But in actuality, wisdom is undifferentiated, and it is only through the power of understanding that it is divided into separated paths. These paths are therefore designated by the name Elohim, the name associated with understanding. Thus, even the plurality of Elohim, denoting a multiplicity. Thus, as understanding denotes the multiplicity of the paths of wisdom, as they are manifest as these different emanations. An example would be water flowing through a system of pipes. Water itself is an undifferentiated fluid having no essential macrocosmic structure, or macroscopic structure, excuse me. Structure is only imposed on it when it flows through the system of pipes. In the analogy, wisdom is the water, while understanding represents the pipes that channel it. And I would note that as a woman myself, in my feminine mind, I appreciate this water analogy. As we know, water represents femininity, the fluidity even of the emotions of femininity. And thus, this water analogy seems to be proof that in its feminine, undifferentiated fluidity, wisdom as Torah is she who is repeatedly prized in the Solomonic wisdom verses of Mishli, or the book of Proverbs. Continuously, wisdom is personified as a woman and as a treasure that we should seek even obsessively. The feminine, fluid, watery wisdom of Torah, like mother, is the all of all, who loves and indulges all without prejudice, just as she shapes, delivers, and gives her teachings to all children, good and bad, from her womb. However, that's my take on wisdom as feminine, but specifically, Ari Kaplan writes that wisdom as chokmah is defined as masculine, which I'll read that quote. Wisdom represents nonverbal thought, while understanding is its verbalization. Wisdom and understanding are seen as being male and female, respectively. In the Kabbalah, wisdom is seen as the father.
Which book are you reading from again?
Sefer Yetzirah.
What page?
Going between pages 12 and 13.
Okay, but you're on page 12 now?
Well, I just transitioned to page 13.
Okay, because I'm going to take a screenshot so people can see, because this is such an important point that he makes that I would like people to follow. So I'm going to take a screenshot of it from my book and then put it up on the Summer Jam screen.
Okay. Yes, appreciate it.
All right. It's your brother Zion Lex. Sign up for our online academy, which is Learn Torah Hebrew Academy at patreon.com/Learn Torah. There are several classes that we offer. We offer a Biblical Hebrew 101 class for beginners. We have a Biblical Hebrew 102 class for people who are a little bit more advanced. We also have a weekly Torah class. We also have our Patriarchs of the Covenant course, our Matriarchs of the Covenant course, and a bi-weekly rabbinical course. All of these courses can be found on Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Learn Torah. You guys were definitely in for it. It's a very invasive class. All of our classes are deeply invasive and very, very meticulous to the T when it comes to understanding the culture, the heritage, and the history of our ancient ancestors. So sign up for Biblical Hebrew at patreon.com/Learn Torah. I am your brother, Zion Lex.
I want everybody to go out there and I want you all to get Nusak Afriki Peshat, Hebrew/English, Sidor Sambation, the legacy of the B'nai Moshe, by the chief rabbi of Africa, Rabbi Pinchas Eliyahu Shaddai. This Sidor, I'm not sure if you guys could tell, it is thick. It is thick. And it contains all of the prayers in Hebrew and in English. Although there are some left in Hebrew, in the very beginning, there are prayers in both English and Hebrew. This Siddur will help everyone in their day-to-day life to approach prayer. All right. I'm going to unshare your screen for a moment just to throw up this screen really quick, because I think it will be dope for everybody to take a look at.
Absolutely.
So we in class mode right now, Princess Adasa. We in class mode. You taking us to class.
Always.
All right. You guys should be able to see my screen. in a couple of moments. There we go. Oh, wow. Is the words legible? Yikes. Oh, yes, it is. Good. All right. Let me share. And there we go. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. And here we go. So you were on page 12 through 13.
Yeah,
and
right.
This is page
Right at 13.
13, right?
Yes. Lots of juice on this page.
Okay.
Lots of goodness. Lots of gems. Okay. All right. Wisdom represents nonverbal thoughts, while understanding is its verbalization. Wisdom and understanding are seen as being male and female, respectively. In the Kabbalah, wisdom is seen as the father, Abba, while understanding is the mother, Ima. The male represents unchanneled creative force. This can only be brought into fruition when delineated, enclosed, and channeled by the female womb, which I love that. I agree mostly. But just because I am a woman and with a feminine mind, there are some subtle nuances with which I personally view that relationship between wisdom and understanding and the manifestation of wisdom and understanding.
I want to stop you for a moment because something highly significant is on the page in light of what you were saying earlier. It says here that the 32 paths are expressed as the letters and numbers, right? The 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet and the 10 cardinal numbers. Since these represent division, they are manifestations of understanding. The Hebrew word Binah is rooted in the Hebrew word Beyn, which means between or divide. Hence, wisdom represents nonverbal thought, while understanding is its verbalization. Now, in this part, it says, in this respect, wisdom and understanding are seen as being male and female, respectively. In the Kabbalah, wisdom is seen as the father, while understanding is the mother. Well, why am I pointing that out? Even though in Kabbalistic literature, wisdom is considered the father, that doesn't deny the fact that the father also has a female expression. Because if you notice, all throughout the Torah, wisdom is spoken of in the feminine. So if what's being pointed out right here is true, and it is true, that wisdom denotes the father, it still has a feminine expression as well. So this is the duality that we're speaking of, how one can have these two male and female counterpart and paralleling expressions. The creator can manifest in a way that we can see is masculine based on concept and ideas. He can manifest in a way that is feminine based on concepts and ideas of how he relates to creation. However, what we're not saying is that the creator is either a man or a woman. We're not saying that. The creator is neither a man or a woman. However, the creator has a masculine way in which the power represents and a feminine way in which the power represents. Okay.
Oh, exactly. Okay. I'm glad that you brought that out because I knew I wasn't tripping, because I know that wisdom is continuously referred to throughout Torah as she, and as this treasure that we should constantly seek out. And even in the Pirkei Avot tractate of the Mishnah, it is written, there are many merits and blessings bestowed upon he who studies Torah for her own sake, specifically denoting her as Torah Lishma. Thus, we are occupied by and occupied in the study of Torah. Even obsessively, we should be immersed in the study of Torah for her own sake. And therefore, we occupy Torah as wisdom, as this womb space of wisdom, the waters of life, as a man occupies a woman, mind, body, and soul, occupying her womb as sacred space. Like the Hindu Sanskrit word yoni denotes sacred space as the woman's reproductive center and the generation of life. And what is life except wisdom and Torah itself? So again, just ad nauseum, these continuous parallels in this continuous affirmation and confirmation of wisdom as womb, as mother, as life, as the foundation of creation, as the establishment of creation. And this intimacy as knowing, again, back to yada, to know, to love, to become, this two becoming one, is this kind of sexual alchemy, for lack of a better word, by which we enter the temple or the tabernacle through the door of wisdom. The womb of Torah is entered through alchemy. And indeed, the dross, as in alchemy, the dross is melted away as the pure metal is purified by fire. The dross of one's profane ego and carnal animalistic instincts has to be burned away and purified to enter the Holy of Holies. And the union itself is alchemy, as well as the unification of the elements congealed to create the new thing, whether it is a baby in the physical sense of masculine and feminine, or the new self emerging from Torah's wisdom as Torah converts the soul and converts the self and transforms one in this crucible-like experience. And to continue on this page, as you scroll further down, what's beautiful is how Ari Kaplan distinguishes the creation of the universe as this engraving. And I do know that your book, it is written and engraved. But
I'm gonna take down my copy because my copy got some personal notes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, mine too. You see my note. I'll be right.
Yeah, a lot of my favorite books, I write a lot of secrets in them as it relates to the things that I'm reading. So I got some things highlighted with some other stuff up there. So yeah, I got to take that down.
Oh, okay. Got you. So the text states that the creator used these 32 paths to engrave so as to create his universe. And he goes into the meaning of the Hebrew word chakak, to engrave, as a carving. And the main difference, he writes, between engraving and writing is that when one writes, one adds material such as ink to the writing's surface, while one engraves, one removes material. So this engraving, this process of engraving, is a removal, an emptying out, a carving of this empty space into which something can be created. And I'm just trying to find a specific note that I wrote pertaining to this. Okay, yes. So this process of engraving is removing something to create a void to be filled rather than merely printing upon or atop it. Before a universe could be created, empty space had to exist in which it could be made. And he refers to this hollow engraved in the supernal luminescence was the vacated space in which all creation subsequently occurred. Initially, he writes, only God existed and all existence was filled with the divine essence, the light of the infinite, Or Ein Sof. It was out of this undifferentiated essence that a vacated space had to be engraved in the process of simsum, or constriction. The hollow engraved, anyway, I read that. The undifferentiated light of the infinite, which existed before constriction, is on the level of wisdom, which is the pure undelineated mind. The power of constriction is that of understanding. It is negative light or negative existence, which can engrave a hollow in the divine essence. This conceptual space is hollow, and I would say hollowed, insofar as it contains the possibility of information, but not actual information. The vacated space is therefore the state where it is possible for information to exist, but where the possibility has not yet been realized. So for me, thinking again of this enduring analogy with the mother and the womb space, this vacated or engraved, emptied out, carved away space seems to correspond with the womb of Torah, this womb space of wisdom, by and with and within which Elohim created the universe by differentiating these 32 paths into understanding as Binah. Thus, the womb is a space for pure potential. And what is pure potential but the seed deposited into woman, deposited into the womb, the seed to be implanted? Indeed, even as being fertilized and implanted to then begin growing in the womb, the seed can be planted to grow into a potential man, yet a man does not yet exist fully. Life, as one draws breath or ruach, begins properly outside of the womb, although one is indeed shaped to potential inside the womb, and even as a child, by extension, shaped by the mother's influence as the first teacher of wisdom, Torah, and within her embrace. This is also why Solomon's writings continuously, they come from his mother. Listen to the words of your mother. Forsake not the words of your mother. Even Proverbs 31 as a whole is actually instructions from his mother on the virtuous woman, the Eshet Chayil, because of course it would take one to know one. So why wouldn't his mother instruct him on how to identify the virtuous woman or the woman of valor? But I digress. So the child is shaped by the mother's influence as the first teacher and within her embrace until the child begins to become independent or differentiated, and the father seduces the child away to the maturity of self-sufficiency from under the mother's swaddling and coddling. And that again is why, patriarchal order is a necessity, because we have the accommodation, the soothing, the comforting, the nurturing of mother, which has its time and place, but a child can only reach their full self-actualization through that balance that the father brings as one differentiates oneself and becomes more independent of the mother by the discipline and the structure that the father provides, and the father kind of pushing the child out into the world as we see naturally. So I think I may have had one last slide just to kind of bring everything home. Well, no, I don't think. I think I'm just going to go into the idea of Maya as illusion and bring this to a close. It would seem then that Maya as illusion is the illusion of difference, separation, distinction, delineation, and differentiation. Because things must be compartmentalized in order to be understood, thus Binah. The necessity of plurality, duality, and polarity is the need for undefined potential, like seminal fluid or seed, to congeal and sublimate into form within the hollowed and hallowed space or void as mother's womb. Thus, we are all contained and shaped as we differentiate into mother's all-accepting, all-loving, all-inclusive womb space. The separation of forces to differentiate into form then creates the necessity of alchemy as masculine and feminine union. Maya, like Isis and this great cosmic universal goddess, might also function in a shadow sense as the illusion of differentiation, the all-mother, or the mother of all, simultaneously the holy grail, the chalice or crucible of congealment, even the cup of wine, metaphorically, from which all nations drink, as the beloved whore of Babylon, or Aleister Crowley's Thelemic Babylon. It is intriguing to me that Binah also shares an etymological root with Beyn, as you said, meaning between, which reminds me also that Beyn, as the son, or otherwise the child of, being the child, thus a being, the spirit of intimacy, going back to Sabon Fusome, this being created between man and woman, mother and father, shaped from the womb or engraved space in which potential life is congealed. Thus, Binah as understanding in the tarot is the Empress, who represents all gain. The Empress is another card in the tarot arcanum, but we don't have time to go into that. But also corresponding with Venus and these love goddesses and prosperity goddesses. So this idea of gain. And we know that scripture tells us in all you're getting, which includes the acquisition of wealth in its many forms, get understanding, or Binah. In representing all gain, the Empress is the queen of all domains, the understanding by which is acquisition, because how can we acquire without understanding? Although through true understanding, one understands that everything gained is everything lost, thus the nature of Maya as illusion. And gain necessitates loss in the divine balance and the ironic equity or equilibrium of duality. Equal and opposite or opposing, both must exist to the differentiated reality. Therefore, one only appreciates, for example, or gains joy having first defined and been defined by pain, for example. Credit only exists in the debit of something else. Surplus only exists in another's deficit due to the constriction. The engraving, the carving out. To imprint something, some part of it must be lost. Wisdom as undifferentiated transmission, like the feminine fluidity of watery, formless seminal emission, is also feminine for me. It is the projection of it as light, the source that is masculine and linear, as a wand or phallus, like light projected from a lens onto the screen of a theater. The light of infinite being, or Ein Sof, the supernal luminescence projected into the womb to congeal and be shaped through sublimation into the quintessence of which Shakespeare's Hamlet so memorably waxed poetic. Thus, Hamlet's question of to be or not to be is the differentiated self emerging from the vacated or hollowed and hollowed space, just as we emerge from the womb of Torah's wisdom, the space carved and engraved, understanding or binah, in which one is surrounded or immersed like mikvah within the watery wisdom of Torah. So I'll just land and say, also we find Kabbalah itself as feminine because Kabbalah means the receiving, and feminine is defined as receptivity in characteristic, as receiving in function, and as the receiver, as the identity of feminine. The identity of woman is that of the receiver. The quality of femininity is one's receptivity. And so Kabbalah itself is feminine, hence its internal nature. That which is occult literally means that which is hidden, just like women's power is hidden within, even in an anatomical sense, and even in an emotional sense. We are more internal, we are more introspective. And so the nature of Kabbalah, even in its contemplative, meditative sense, is this introspective that itself is feminine, exploring the shadows and mysteries of the layers of Torah on an internal sense, the deeper shadow sense of meaning. Hence, like the mysteries of women enclosed, Kabbalah itself is an obscure, hidden, and private path. The Hebrew word natif is to be found, this secret hidden path to be found as one finds a wife or finds a good thing to obtain the favor or treasure of the Lord. And I will land there.
All right. Thank you so very much for a very, very powerful demonstration. We need more demonstrations like this. And as I tell people, this is why we also need to hear more from our sisterhood, from the women of Torah in our communities, because the contributions that are being offered in the community on behalf of the men, they are certainly great. But if we are to get to excellence, there needs to be a balance. And that balance doesn't occur until we also include the contribution of our sisters, of our women. And so I am especially appreciative, and that's why this platform is especially open to the voices and contribution of the sisterhood, because I know that without that balance, we're missing out on something that is so intrinsic towards our learning. Even as was quoted earlier in the chat room, where someone quoted from the book, I believe, of Proverbs, where he said, listen to the commandment of your father and forsake not the teaching of your mother, right? Balance. All right. All right. On that note, everybody, thank you all for being here. Where can everybody find you?
I think that was the last slide. I have my little information up there. Instagram, Hadara Womb Care. My website is www.hadarabeautyblissbirth.com. And I'm on Facebook as Hawa.Hadassah.
All right. Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that. Someone had a question. The question is, quick question. What do you think of the Zohar from a Kabbalah perspective? Well, the only way to look at the Zohar is from the Kabbalistic perspective, because the Zohar is a Kabbalistic work. So I think great things about the Zohar. I don't know what to say to answer your question. I certainly study it. This is one of a 5-volume series on it, the Zohar. This is all in English. For those who are interested in buying the series, you can buy it in a smaller form like this in a 5-volume series. You can get the single book like this, right? Except this is Aramaic. The letters, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it because of the light, and you clearly won't. But the letters are entirely in Aramaic. So what do I think about the Zohar? It's an esoteric commentary on the first 5 books of the Bible. It presents the deepest way in which we can look at, understand, and discern what is being presented before us. And so on that point, the Zohar is an amazing work. Been studying the Zohar since 1997. And it's an amazing, amazing work. That's my thoughts on it. If you want to know more on it, the Zohar, we do have Kabbalah classes every Thursday at 8 p.m. We have a Biblical Hebrew advanced class. For those of you that already know a little bit of Hebrew, but you want to advance your Hebrew studies, y'all should be in our advanced Hebrew class. That's happening tonight at 7:30 p.m. on Patreon. That's tonight at 7:30 p.m. on Patreon. In fact, let me go to my share screen really quick. Where is that?
I'm going to have to shout out real quick Rav Hawa. You know, we sisters, we got the same name, but she is the excellent teacher of the Biblical Hebrew 102 class. So shout out Rav Hawa. She is fire.
Sure is. She is the teacher for our advanced Biblical Hebrew 101 class. Shout out to Rav Hawa. This is the class here, Biblical Hebrew 102. If you guys want to join, go to Patreon, patreon.com/learn Torah. That's patreon.com/learn Torah, where we're going to have an advanced Hebrew class tonight at 7:30 p.m. All right. You're welcome, Vital Empress. You're welcome. So yes, at 7:30 p.m. So all of you out there that know a little bit of Hebrew and you would like to advance your studies, our 102 or advanced class is tonight at 7:30 p.m. For those of you who absolutely do not know Hebrew, our beginners class is every Monday at 8 p.m. So make sure you guys go to our Patreon and apply for the classes that fits what you're looking for. On that note, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming through. Once again, another banger. We made history again. We did it. And I want to say to you, Shabbat Shalom. May you have a beautiful Shabbat. And to the rest of the community, peace. Shalom.
Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, Mishpacha. Nasi.
I want everybody to go out there and I want you all to get Nusak Afriki Peshat, Hebrew/English, Sidor Sambation, the legacy of the B'nai Moshe, by the chief rabbi of Africa, Rabbi Pinchas Eliyahu Shaddai. This Sidor, I'm not sure if you guys could tell, it is thick. It is thick. And it contains all of the prayers in Hebrew and in English. Although there are some left in Hebrew, In the very beginning,